The Son of Sam Timeline, Christmas Eve, 1975. The alleged unidentified Hispanic female and Michelle Forman. Let's take a look at and compare the sources that we have. Son of Sam by Klausner, Confessions of Son of Sam by Dr. Abrahamsen, Killer Tape, Jack Jones, and Archives Daily News and the New York Times. Please like and subscribe. The unidentified Hispanic woman, as described by Klausner. He now began driving in a looping pattern, following Co-op City Boulevard, past the bright windows of the Co-op City supermarket, around to Baychester Avenue and back again. He was waiting to see the right person and hear the voices. On David's third pass on the wide boulevard, he saw a woman leave the supermarket for the comparative darkness of the street. She wore a long, heavy navy blue wool coat, its collar turned up against the cold. David could not see her features, but suddenly he heard demon voices croaking, "Get her." His excitement was overwhelmed by fright. He must obey or face the merciless anger of the demons. He double-parked the Ford, cut the engine, and locked the door. Then in an ambling shuffle, he hurried after the woman ahead of him. Close to her now, he reached for his knife. "She has to be sacrificed," the demon voices cried. David heard the demons say they wanted to drink her blood. He lifted the hunting knife and arched it downward, striking the unknown woman in mid-back. He struck again, and he could feel the knife blade tear her heavy coat. "I had a job to do," David said later, "and I was doing it." A single street lamp glowed 30 feet from Berkowitz as he pounded the hunting knife at the woman's back. "I stabbed her," he said, "and she didn't do anything. She just turned and looked at me." In the dim Christmas Eve light, David saw that the woman was Hispanic. His fervid knife thrusts could not have hurt her very much. At first she did not scream in pain or cry. But after the woman had turned and saw a hulking figure with a raised knife, terror embraced her. She began to wail in fright. "It was terrible," David said. "She was screaming pitifully, and I didn't know what the hell to do. It wasn't like the movies. In the movies, you sneak up on someone and they fall down quietly, dead. It wasn't like that. She was staring at my knife and screaming. She wasn't dying." The woman dropped her packages of groceries, which spilled onto the pavement. Trying to defend herself, she groped for David's large, soft body. Her screams were making David sick. He was not sure if the knife had penetrated the heavy coat. "There was so much confusion," he said later, "and the screams were getting me scared." Panicked, Berkowitz ran away from the woman and away from his double-parked Ford. Later he told a psychiatrist that he could not understand why the woman had screamed so. "I wasn't going to rob her or touch her or rape her. I just wanted to kill her." No one knows who this woman was or what she did next or even how badly she was injured. She never reported the assault to the police. She never checked herself into a hospital. Just a mental note here. When we dive into Dr. Abrahamsen's notes, you're going to hear some strange discrepancies, but we'll come back to that. Let's move on to Klausner's account of the Michelle Forman stabbing. He saw another woman approaching from out of the darkness. She was younger and attractive. The knife was still in David's hand. He concealed it within the denim jacket and stared after the second woman as she approached a pedestrian bridge that crossed the roadway. In the coldness of the bitter night, sweat streamed down David's face. He resumed his lumbering, murderous shuffle. He would attack her from behind. Michelle Forman, a 15-year-old sophomore at Truman High School, had reached the very center of the bridge when Berkowitz caught her. Michelle first felt a stabbing pain in her head. The knife then struck her upper body 3 times. She grabbed the bridge railing to keep her balance and turned to look at her attacker. Blood spurted from her head. David struck twice at Michelle Forman's face. She was a pretty girl, David would say. He looked at her, thinking, "Why aren't you dead?" Fighting for her life, Michelle Forman lashed at David's face. Then she lost her footing and fell to the concrete walkway. In agony and terror, Michelle writhed and rolled and shrieked. Traffic continued to growl from the thruway below. "I never heard anyone scream like that," David said. The way she screamed constantly. I kept stabbing and nothing would happen. She kept fighting harder and screaming more. I didn't know. I just ran off. Badly wounded, Michelle Forman still tried to clutch her attacker's legs. She wanted to see his face, to know who he was, but David ran off. Michelle struggled to her feet and was able to note that Berkowitz ran with a sluggish gait. She could not catch him. She had lost so much blood that the high buildings of Co-op City appeared to spin. She stumbled and lurched towards the closest building where she lived with her parents. Michelle reached for the lobby buzzer that would alert her family before she could press it. She fainted. A neighbor found Michelle whimpering as she lay in a puddle of her own blood. She was hospitalized for 7 days with 6 stab wounds about the head and body. One of Berkowitz's knife thrusts had gone deep enough to collapse a lung. Like the Hispanic woman, Michelle Forman did not know Berkowitz. Her description of a dark-haired, hulking man with an awkward gait could not isolate a killer among the 8.5 million people of New York. Now we'll hear it from Dr. Abrahamsen. Chapter 5, Stalking the Victims. On Christmas Eve 1975, on Baychester Avenue in Co-op City in the Bronx, a 14-year-old girl was attacked and stabbed repeatedly in the back and side of the chest by an unknown assailant. Her screams attracted attention and she was rushed to Jacobi Hospital. Her wounds, proving to be superficial, were treated and she was released. For a long time afterward, she was beset by terror, nervousness, and nightmares. I was taken quite by surprise when, at an early interview with Berkowitz, he openly confessed to me that he had committed the crime. This was news to me. He hadn't mentioned it before. He told me, "I attacked a girl. I put a knife in her several times. I realized I'd stabbed her. After the stabbing, I ran to my car." "When you ran away, you must have realized you did something wrong." "Yes," he answered. "How did you feel when you stabbed her?" "Very strange, confused. I didn't understand what was happening to me. I tried to kill. That was a mess," he added. "It was a young girl. I had a small hunting knife with a blade 3.5 inches long. I used to go to the woods and go camping. It was late at night, about 10:30 or 11. I saw her immediately. In my first attempt to kill, I didn't know how to do it. I stabbed her. She looked at me. I stabbed her again. It was terrible. She screamed pitifully. It wasn't like the movies when the stabbed person falls down and is killed. I kept stabbing her with the knife. She was trying to grab me. She screamed and I was getting sick. It made me sick. After a little while, I just couldn't tell whether she was stabbed or I was just ripping at her coat. I wasn't going to rape her or take her money. I was only going to kill her. That's all." Even though Klausner's book came out before Abrahamsen, remember, Abrahamsen was one of his sources. Jack Jones and Bill Badgley on the unidentified Hispanic woman. Jack. The inside story, aren't they all, revealed for the first time, isn't it always? David Berkowitz committed his first act of wanton violence on Christmas Eve 1975. He attacked two females, a 13-year-old girl and a middle-aged woman, with a hunting knife that had a 4.5-inch blade. The woman never filed a complaint with the New York City Police Department. Berkowitz, who would have known, says not true. Bill. But he doesn't really specify what in that paragraph is not true. Jack. Right. Bill. Just because some of that we know is true. Jack. And both, only one of those attacks occurred on Christmas Eve, though. There was only one woman. Bill. Yeah, Michelle Forman. Jack. Yeah, that he there was another one. Yeah. Bill. Yeah, brutal. Brutal. Jack. Yeah. Bill. Unbelievably brutal. Jack Jones and Berkowitz. How long after you saw that movie did you go out with a knife, attack the woman, and she screamed and you let her go and you fled? David. Yeah, she wasn't really hurt or anything. I don't know what happened. It's just I didn't know what to do with all these frustrations and anger. Being angry and being built up, just started at that point. That was when it was starting to turn outward, you see. Why did you let her go after you had her? Because I didn't really want to do anything, you see. Did you? I was confused, like I was driven between 2 points. New York Times, August 18th, 1977. Approached on a bridge, Miss Forman, now a 15-year-old student at Truman High School, said last night that she had been approached from behind and stabbed 6 times by a heavy-set man whose face she had never seen. According to Miss Forman, she chased her assailant off the footbridge and into a nearby parking lot, noting she said that he ran with a sluggish gait. Miss Forman said she had then run to her building and collapsed, suffering from 3 stab wounds in her head and 3 in her body. She said she had been hospitalized for 7 days with a collapsed lung. Miss Forman said the police had not made contact with her in the wake of Mr. Berkowitz's reputed statement. At the 45th Precinct, where the initial report indicated that Miss Forman's attacker was in his late 40s, much older than the 24-year-old Mr. Berkowitz, the police said that the detective assigned to the case was not on duty yesterday, but would be today. In the reported attack at Co-op City, according to the police there, the only woman who was stabbed at the project that month was a teenage girl, Michelle Forman, who was attacked at 10:15 p.m., December 24, 1975, as she was walking on Pedestrian Bridge over the Governor Thomas E. Dewey Thruway at Baychester Avenue. Daily News, Wednesday, August 17, 1977. I saved this excerpt for last because David Berkowitz confesses to stabbing Michelle. New Sam Confession, Knife Young Woman by William Federici. David Berkowitz has reportedly confessed to still another brutal attack, the 1975 stabbing of a young woman outside her Co-op City apartment house. Acting on the statement by the accused Son of Sam killer to a Brooklyn assistant district attorney and cops the morning of his arrest, detectives from a special police task force have examined records of the unsolved crime from the Bronx 45th Precinct and have questioned the victim of the stabbing. While recuperating from the knife attack in a Bronx hospital, the woman gave cops a detailed description of her attacker, which police say seemed to fit Berkowitz very closely. This is from Klausner. This book has been created from the most careful research of which the author is capable. I have interviewed and taped interviews with almost 300 people, including the families of victims, surviving victims, policemen, politicians, attorneys, psychiatrists, and newspapermen. It is my understanding that Berkowitz did not collaborate with Klausner, nor did Klausner ever visit Berkowitz. So, where did he get that detailed story about the unidentified Hispanic woman? And notice how Klausner and Abrahamsen got their stories all mixed up. We've shown several sources to back up the Michelle Forman story, so I'm going to go with that's a definite. As far as the unidentified Hispanic woman, not so much. Remember, the police had no idea that Berkowitz stabbed Michelle Forman. He admitted that upon his arrest. He denied the other stabbing to Jack Jones. Thanks for listening.